I was never one for drama. My life in New York was meticulously arranged, predictable, maybe even a little dull, but I liked it that way. As a curator at a gallery in Chelsea, I spent my days bringing order to chaos, arranging masterpieces into neat, understandable exhibits. Control was my art, but control, I was about to learn, is an illusion, especially when family is involved. It started, predictably, with my sister. Not just any sister, but Serena. Serena, with her electric energy, her impulsive charm that drew people in like moths to a flame. My little sister, who could light up a room, and I'd learned the hard way, burn it all down just as easily. That night, I got home early from work, a rare thing for me. If I hadn't, maybe none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have seen what I did. The way she was draped all over Jason, my boyfriend, in our living room. It was like they were rehearsing for some off-Broadway play, the kind with too much skin and not enough plot. Intimate, practiced, like they knew the lines by heart. They were so engrossed they didn't even see me standing there, frozen in the doorway. But I saw everything. I remember the silence, the air thick with unspoken things, and this strange calm washing over me instead of the rage I probably should have felt. This was Serena. The woman I'd spent my life shielding, forgiving, even loving, despite her endless selfishness. It was almost funny, this absurd twist of fate, if my heart wasn't cracking open, slow and steady, like a priceless vase dropped on a marble floor. I couldn't breathe, but the silence was too satisfying to break. Maybe that's when it clicked. Maybe that's when I started to understand why people do crazy things. I backed away, closed the door softly, slipped back into the shadows of the hallway. I made a silent promise to myself right then and there. I would handle this, my way. No screaming, no tears. I was done with all that. I wanted something quieter, something sharper, something that would cut her deep, let her know exactly what she'd done without me uttering a single word. Mike, her fiancé, would be my unwitting accomplice. Serena? She'd get the message. But revenge, I was already starting to realize, is never as clean as you imagine it to be. Serena and I were always different, two sides of the same tarnished coin, cut from the same cloth but stitched with opposite threads. Where I craved order, she reveled in chaos. Maybe that's why I wasn't as shocked as I should have been when I saw her with Jason. It wasn't shock that hit me, it was this eerie sense of inevitability, like every time I'd smoothed things over for her, every little incident I'd brushed aside, had been leading us to this exact moment. After that night, the memory of it clung to me like a cheap perfume you can't scrub off. It followed me to work, drifting through the sterile white galleries as I cataloged new acquisitions. I tried to focus, to lose myself in the art, the clean lines, the deliberate strokes, the control. Art had always been my sanctuary. But in the echoing quiet of the exhibition halls, it wasn't the hushed reverence of art lovers I heard. It was Serena's laughter. Serena's figure bending towards Jason's in that dimly lit living room. The image was a loop, playing endlessly in my mind. And then there was Mike. Poor, clueless Mike. The next day, I found myself downtown, walking towards his law office, a place I'd been invited to maybe twice before. We weren't close, not really, but Serena's wedding, looming just weeks away, had thrown us into the same orbit. He was always friendly, polite, a little shy, with this unassuming charm that was the polar opposite of Jason's flashy intensity. Mike was buried under a mountain of legal files when I walked in, startled when I appeared in his doorway. "Kara?" he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "Is everything okay?" I had rehearsed some casual excuse for my visit, some flimsy wedding-related pretense, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just looked at him. Serena's fiancé, a man who trusted her as blindly as I once had. "Actually," I said, my voice softer than I intended, "I could use some help with Serena's wedding details." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, mocking me with what I knew. I just thought I'd make myself useful. He smiled, a real smile that warmed his whole face. "You have no idea how much I appreciate that. Serena's been busy." "I know," I said. "She'll be thrilled to have you step in." Thrilled. I almost laughed out loud. If only he knew what else she'd been busy with. Mike and I started spending afternoons together, working through the endless wedding details that Serena had, predictably, left scattered and undone. It wasn't lost on me that we worked well together. Efficiently, calmly, methodically. Everything Serena was not. Mike took everything seriously, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over seating charts and floral arrangements. We debated wine pairings, linen choices, the precise shade of ivory for the invitations. Dreadfully mundane stuff, really. But with every small decision, a strange, quiet intimacy grew between us. I found myself lingering after we'd finished, watching him work, the focused intensity in his eyes. One evening, buried deep in menu options, Mike leaned back, stretching, and looked at me, a weariness in his eyes that seemed to age him beyond his years. "Do you ever wonder," he started, trailing off with a hesitant laugh, "do you ever wonder if she even cares about all this? The details, I mean. I don't know if she sees things the same way." It was an innocent enough statement, but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. The same quiet doubt that had gnawed at me for years, watching Serena breeze through life, leaving chaos and broken hearts in her wake. "Sometimes," I replied, carefully keeping my voice even, "Serena doesn't understand the value of the things right in front of her." He gave me a thoughtful look, his brow furrowed. For a moment, I wondered if he saw through the carefully constructed layers of my composure, if he sensed the simmering anger beneath the surface. But he just nodded, letting out a long sigh. Our after-work meetings became a routine, a strange but comforting ritual that filled the empty hours after work. I could feel something shifting between us, an unspoken awareness, a current humming just beneath the surface. But I kept telling myself it was all part of the plan. I was just setting the stage. Then came the night. The night I'd been waiting for, without even realizing I was waiting. It was a Thursday, a rare pocket of calm in the frantic weeks leading up to the wedding. Mike had invited me to his apartment, under the guise of finalizing last-minute details. As I sat there, a glass of wine in hand, watching the way he moved around his kitchen, quiet and steady, the urge I'd been suppressing for weeks rose to the surface. "I don't know how you do it," I said finally, watching him with a small, almost sad smile. "All this patience, I think I would have lost my mind by now." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for it, for marriage, for this life." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. A crack in his carefully constructed resolve, and all at once my plan felt almost too easy, too perfectly orchestrated. I set my wine glass down, meeting his gaze with a steady intensity I hadn't allowed myself to show before. "Maybe," I murmured, my voice low, "maybe it's the idea of who we're marrying that scares us more than the idea of marriage itself." There was a beat of silence. His eyes searched mine, as if trying to decipher some hidden message, some unspoken truth. Then, without another word, he reached for my hand. What happened after that wasn't planned. Not exactly. But as I'd learned that other night, even the most carefully laid plans can't prepare you for the moment when a line is crossed. And crossing it felt inevitable, like I'd been waiting for this release my entire life. The morning after, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't guilt that washed over me, but a deep, unsettling satisfaction, like I'd finally restored some kind of balance to a world that had been tilting wildly off its axis. But the sense of victory was fleeting, quickly replaced by a heavier, more dangerous realization. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And now the consequences of that act would unravel in ways I couldn't possibly foresee. I spent the next few days moving through my life as if nothing had changed. Serena flitted around, a whirlwind of manic energy, excitedly sharing wedding details she probably didn't even care about. But I noticed a shift in Mike, a subtle distance, a hesitation in his voice when he spoke to her. His eyes would flick to mine in moments when Serena wasn't looking, a silent, charged reminder of the secret we now shared. And yet, the final piece of my plan remained untouched. The video. The video I'd recorded that single night we'd spent together. I'd intended it to be my weapon, my final, devastating blow, my way to make Serena truly see the consequences of her selfishness. But now, with the video hidden away on my phone, I felt the weight of it. It was both a key to her ruin and a stark reminder of what I'd become. It wasn't long before Serena sensed something was off. Maybe it was Mike's newfound reserve, or the lingering, loaded glances he stole at me when he thought no one was looking. It all came to a head 2 days before the wedding. Serena cornered me at a family dinner, her eyes narrowed, sharp, and accusatory. "You've been acting weird," she hissed, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "And don't think I haven't noticed the way Mike looks at you. Did something happen?" Her accusation hung in the air between us, thick and charged. For a moment, I considered denying it, brushing her off, playing the innocent victim like I'd done 1,000 times before. But there was a dark, twisted satisfaction in finally letting her see a sliver of the truth. Maybe, I whispered back, my voice laced with barely restrained anger, maybe you should consider what happens when the people you take for granted decide to show you who they really are. Hermes paled, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But before she could respond, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, caught between disbelief and dawning suspicion. As I walked, I felt the weight of the secrets I carried, heavy, dark, and thrillingly dangerous. 2 days before the wedding, the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife from my kitchen drawer. Serena's sharp, suspicious gaze followed me everywhere. Though I pretended not to notice, I knew she was watching, probing, trying to decipher the shift in the atmosphere. She didn't know exactly what had happened between Mike and me, not yet, but I could see the paranoia creeping into her mind, filling it with all the worst possibilities. It was the same kind of gnawing suspicion I'd felt when I'd caught her with Jason. Now it was her turn to feel that icy grip of betrayal, that constant nagging doubt about the people she thought she knew, the people she trusted most. But I still hadn't decided what to do with the video. Part of me, the darker, vengeful part, wanted to detonate the bomb, to unleash it, to let her see exactly what had happened and watch her perfectly constructed world crumble around her. And yet, another part of me hesitated, unsure if I could actually go through with it. Revenge was intoxicating, a heady rush of power. But the fallout was something I hadn't fully calculated. Mike was avoiding me as expected. He kept his focus laser sharp on the wedding preparations, going through the motions, ticking off boxes on endless checklists. But I noticed his gaze would linger on me from across the room, at family dinners, at rushed wedding errands. His face was etched with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret? Longing? Or was he too wrestling with the tangled reality of what we'd done? The night before the wedding, I found myself standing in my bedroom, staring at my phone. The video was there, tucked away in a hidden folder, a digital time bomb ready to be detonated with a single tap of my finger. I had imagined showing it to Serena so many times, played it out in my head like a twisted movie scene, pictured the look on her face, the shock, the dawning realization, the utter devastation. But as I stood there, phone in hand, I felt something else, a hollow feeling, an emptiness that hadn't been there before, even in the darkest hours after discovering Serena and Jason. A knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Mike standing there, his face shadowed in the dim hallway light. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, barely a whisper. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Mike paced around my room, restless, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, his expression tight, strained. I waited, watching him, letting the silence stretch, thick and heavy as he struggled to find the right words. "Kara," he began finally, his voice still barely audible. "What we did, it was wrong, and I can't stop thinking about it." I crossed my arms, leaning against my dresser, a wave of regret washing over me. "Regretting it already?" I asked, unable to keep the sharp edge out of my voice. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Fear. "Serena," he hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "She's starting to suspect something, and I can't do this. I can't hurt her like this." The irony of his words was almost laughable. Here he was, terrified of hurting Serena, the same woman who had so easily, so casually betrayed him. But instead of laughing, I felt a sudden surge of bitterness, cold and sharp. "Mike," I said slowly, each word measured, "if she cared about you, she wouldn't have..." The words caught in my throat, choked off by a sudden rush of emotion. I trailed off, unsure if I wanted to go down this road, to expose the full extent of Serena's betrayal. But his expression shifted. A flicker of anger, hot and sudden, sparked in his eyes. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his voice hardening. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "She was with Jason. She's been with him this whole time." He stared at me, stunned, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. "You're lying." I shook my head. "I wish I were, but I saw it myself. That's why we..." I trailed off again, unable to finish the sentence, the shame and anger rising up in my throat. Mike looked away, his jaw clenched tight, his hands curling into fists. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I thought it didn't matter," I admitted, the truth raw and ugly in the air between us. I thought I thought she'd end up ruining things on her own, but when I saw her with Jason, I realized how easy it was for her to betray the people who care about her. He was silent for a long time, his shoulders slumped, his body language radiating defeat as he processed the weight of the truth. Finally, he looked at me, a new resolve hardening his gaze. Show me the proof. The next morning, just hours before the wedding was supposed to begin, Mike and I were in his office. I pulled up the video on my phone, my hands trembling slightly as I handed it to him. His hands shook even more as he took it. His face drained of color as he watched the screen. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension, unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. When the video ended, he handed the phone back to me, his face etched with a mixture of raw anger and profound heartbreak. I can't believe it, he murmured more to himself than to me, and after everything, all those years. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling an unexpected wave of sympathy for him, for the pain Serena had so carelessly inflicted. Now you know the truth, Mike. You deserve better than this. You deserve someone who actually cares about you. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, a silent question hanging in the air. And what about you, Kara? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let it get this far? I didn't have an answer for him, at least not one I could say out loud. The truth was, I hadn't just wanted to expose Serena. I had wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the same crushing betrayal she had inflicted on me. But now, seeing the raw pain in Mike's eyes, the devastation on his face, I wasn't so sure if it had all been worth it. As he turned to leave, a sense of panic rising in my chest, I grabbed his arm, stopping him. What are you going to do? He paused, his gaze distant, lost in thought. I don't know, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But I can't go through with the wedding. A part of me felt relieved, vindicated even. My plan, in its twisted way, had worked. But as I watched him walk away, disappearing down the hallway, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning of the fallout. When Serena's wedding day dawned, bright and sunny over Manhattan, she was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. I watched her from a distance as she laughed and chatted with her bridesmaids in the penthouse suite of the hotel, her excitement palpable, radiating off her in waves. But as the minutes ticked by, a sense of dread settled over me, cold and heavy in my gut. I had set this in motion. And now, with Mike's decision hanging in the balance, I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the consequences. The ceremony was scheduled for noon. By 11:30, there was still no sign of Mike. Serena started to notice. Her excitement began to fray, replaced by a growing confusion, then worry. She paced the room, her gaze flicking to the door every few seconds, her hands clutching her pristine white bouquet so tightly her knuckles were white. Finally, just as the clock struck noon, Mike arrived. His face was pale, drawn, his expression unreadable. Serena rushed over to him, relief flooding her face, but he barely looked at her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm, cutting through the excited chatter of the bridal party. They stepped outside onto the balcony, leaving the room in a tense, suffocating silence. I stayed back, near the window, my heart pounding against my ribs as I waited, unsure of what would happen next. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, Serena burst back into the room, her face flushed, contorted with a mixture of rage and raw hurt. "The wedding is off!" she screamed, the words ripping through the air like a gunshot. The news spread like wildfire. Whispers, shocked gasps, a chaotic flurry of panicked questions filled the air as guests scrambled to understand what had happened. Serena was inconsolable, a raw nerve exposed, demanding answers from everyone, anyone who would listen. But Mike was gone. Vanished without a word, leaving Serena to face the public humiliation alone. I stayed behind, watching her from a distance, a detached observer as she struggled to keep herself together, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. But then her gaze landed on me. Her expression shifted, suspicion flaring in her eyes, hot and accusatory. "You!" she spat, storming over to me, her voice shaking with fury. "This is your fault, isn't it?" I held my ground, meeting her glare with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "You did this to yourself, Serena." Her face twisted in rage, her hands clenching at her sides. "What did you do? What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth," I replied, my voice steady, unwavering. "I told him about you and Jason." The shock in her eyes was almost satisfying, a dark, twisted satisfaction that quickly curdled into something ugly. But I could see the fear there too, flickering beneath the surface rage. The dawning realization that her carefully guarded secrets had finally caught up with her. You had no right," she hissed, her voice trembling, on the verge of breaking. "You ruined everything." No, Serena, I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. You ruined it. The moment you betrayed him, and me. She stood there, stunned, speechless, her gaze filled with a toxic mixture of rage and disbelief. For once, Serena had no snappy comeback, no clever deflection, no way to deny or minimize what she'd done. In the weeks that followed, Serena's life began to unravel. Her engagement was over, her reputation in tatters, her once unshakable confidence shattered into a million pieces. She withdrew from everyone, retreated into herself, unable to face the wreckage of her own making, including me. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out in any way. It was as if I had ceased to exist in her world. Mike and I didn't speak after that day either. Whatever fractured, fragile connection we'd shared had been irrevocably tainted by the lies, the betrayal, the messy, destructive secrets we'd kept. He moved away, seeking a fresh start, a clean slate, somewhere far from the toxic mess Serena and I had created. As for me, I returned to my quiet, orderly life in my meticulously clean apartment, back to my predictable routine at the gallery. But things were never quite the same. The satisfaction I had expected, the sense of justice I had craved, had eluded me. Instead, I was left with an emptiness, a hollow ache in my chest, a constant, nagging reminder of the true price of revenge. I never did delete the video. It sits there, buried deep in a hidden folder on my phone, a digital ghost of the past. I can't bring myself to erase it. Maybe someday, years from now, I'll finally let it go. But for now, it's a reminder. A cautionary tale about the corrosive power of betrayal and the dangerous lengths we'll go to settle old scores. And maybe, just maybe, a small, dark part of me still waits for the day when I'll get my final chance to truly make things right. Months crawled by. Serena and I remained estranged, silent ghosts in each other's lives. She had moved out of the city, fled to some anonymous suburb, hoping to escape the whispers, the sidelong glances, the lingering judgment of those who knew what had happened. For a while, I managed to convince myself that our chapter was finally closed, that I could lock away the memories, bury them deep like the video still hidden on my phone. But secrets, I was about to learn, don't stay buried. They resurface, always, forcing you to confront the uglier parts of yourself when you least expect it. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen stopped me cold. Serena. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach, debating whether to answer, whether to open that old, festering wound. But curiosity and maybe a sliver of guilt won out. I tapped accept. Her voice on the other end was hollow, drained of its usual spark, like a ghost calling from another life. "Kara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I need to see you." "What's this about, Serena?" I asked, my voice wary, guarded. I could sense something different in her tone, a desperate urgency that unsettled me. "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking, breaking apart. "I don't know who else to call." We met later that evening at a small, out-of-the-way cafe in the West Village, a place I knew would be deserted on a Saturday night. Serena looked different. The usual bright spark in her eyes was completely gone, replaced by a haunted, vacant stare. She was thinner, almost gaunt, her face pale, deep shadows etched under her eyes. As I sat across from her, the silence stretching between us, I realized she hadn't met my gaze once. "Why did you want to see me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, detached. She let out a shaky breath, clutching her coffee cup with both hands as if it were the only thing anchoring her to reality. "I know I messed up, Kara," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "and I've been dealing with the fallout of that every single day." She paused, biting her lip, her eyes darting nervously around the empty cafe. "But there's something you don't know, something I need to tell you." My mind raced, a cold dread creeping up my spine, wondering what other dark secrets she could possibly be harboring. But her expression was so raw, so utterly different from her usual flippant demeanor, that I stayed silent, waiting, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "It's about Jason," she said, her voice barely a whisper, the name hanging in the air between us like a toxic cloud. "After the wedding was called off, he came to see me." The mention of his name was like a physical blow, a cold slap that stirred up memories I had desperately tried to bury, to forget. Serena looked down at her trembling hands, refusing to meet my eyes. "He said he wanted to make things right, said he'd made mistakes, that he never meant to hurt you." She paused, her voice faltering, cracking again. He wanted a fresh start, with me. I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, sharp and sudden, a fresh wave of anger washing over me, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to keep my face impassive, my expression blank. But he wasn't right, she continued, her voice barely audible now, choked with emotion. He wasn't okay. It was like he was haunted. Like he couldn't let go of what had happened. He started showing up at my apartment, at my work, leaving messages, watching me. Her voice trembled, her eyes widening with a fear that was palpable, radiating across the table. And then, 2 weeks ago, he disappeared. Disappeared? I echoed, frowning, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. What do you mean disappeared? His phone is off. No one's seen him, not his friends, not his family. I even went to the police. But they didn't take me seriously. Said he was probably just off the grid. But I know something's wrong, Kara. I know it. Her voice was rising now, bordering on hysteria. And now I keep getting these messages. She reached into her bag, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp the crumpled piece of paper. She slid it across the table to me, her eyes wide, pleading, filled with a raw, primal fear. I unfolded it, my pulse quickening as I recognized the handwriting. Jason's. It was scrawled hastily, almost frantically, as though he'd written it in a rush, his thoughts spilling out onto the page in a torrent of dark, unsettling words. Some things can't be forgiven, it read. Some debts always come due. My blood ran cold. I suddenly understood. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. Back in my apartment, hours later, the city lights blurring outside my window, I found a USB drive tucked into the crumpled paper Serena had given me. I plugged the drive into my computer, my hands shaking, bracing myself for whatever I was about to find. The screen flickered to life. A new video, one that made my heart sink, a cold wave of dread washing over me. It was a montage, my life. Clips and photos of me, of Serena, of Mike, of Jason. My life's secrets, every carefully hidden detail, stitched together with a chilling precision by someone who had been watching me, observing me, for far longer than I'd ever realized. And then, at the very end of the video, after the last image faded to black, a single line of text appeared on the screen. A final, chilling message. The game isn't over, Kara, it read, stark white letters against a black void. It's only just begun. As the screen went dark, plunging my apartment into an even deeper silence, I felt a chilling certainty settle over me, cold and heavy and suffocating. Jason was out there, somewhere in the shadows, lurking, waiting, planning his next move. I realized then, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that I hadn't merely destroyed Serena's life. I had invited a darkness into my own, a darkness that wouldn't be easily shaken off. My revenge, in its twisted, destructive spiral, had come full circle, consuming everything in its path. And as I sat there, alone in the quiet of my apartment, enveloped by the silence, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the ending I'd truly wanted, or if it was only the beginning of my own reckoning.